Hello and welcome to Spy Hard's podcast. I am Agent Scott and we are coming to you with a very special declassified episode looking at the brand new Matthew Vaughn spy film Argylle. And joining me on this mission this week, we are joined by the very special agent himself, Mr. Chris Carr. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hello, I'm good, Scott. How are you?
Doing wonderful. All the better to see you earlier today at the Argylle screening we were invited to. So, as per the usual rules of Declassified, we're bringing you our instant takes on the film, which basically I'm going to lay out the format of the episode for you all so you all know what you're getting yourselves into. After we've done this, me and Chris are going to talk about the film in a non-spoiler form. So we're not going to ruin anything for you because there are some twists and turns in this film that we don't want to spoil for you. We're going to talk about what our quick thoughts were and if we think you should check out the film. After that, I am very pleased to announce that I am joined by the director of the film, Mr. Matthew Vaughn himself, who's going to be on the show talking about Argylle and maybe a few other things. So that'll be coming after our chat with Chris. And then following that, we're going to get right into the spoilers, talk about the twists and turns and what you can expect from Argylle when you hopefully go and check it out in theaters. How does that sound for you, Chris?
Sounds good to me. Sounds good to me.
So, as I mentioned, we're talking about Argylle this week. And if you don't know about Argylle, it is a new film due out in theaters on February the 2nd. And here is the synopsis. An introverted spy novelist is drawn into the activities of a sinister underground syndicate. That sounds mysterious. Now, it's going to be an interesting one to talk about, but as I said at the front, this is non-spoilers, guys, so you can hang in there, you listen to this, we're not going to ruin anything for you, we're just going to talk about what Chris and I thought of it. So I'll throw to you, Chris, you're our guest.
Yeah.
What did you, sort of non-spoiler, of course, what did you think of Argylle?
Yeah, so my off-the-cuff, trying to sound intelligent reaction is, I think Argylle is a love letter to the Roger Moore era James Bond films, as Austin Powers was to 60s spy films. I think Argylle is perfect kind of weekend entertainment. I would definitely recommend going to see it in a cinema. For me, it's definitely not a Wednesday night viewing. I prefer highbrow things for that. But this
what's with Wednesday and highbrow? Is that like a highbrow day for you?
Yeah, it'd be like a Wong Kar-wai film or something like that. The Prince Charles cinema.
Wow.
But or maybe Spy Game if I'm in a sort of in the mood. So yeah, it's definitely not a. So definitely Argylle is not a kind of realistic thriller or anything like that. It's just a fun kind of fun pastiche of spy films, but I feel it's a pastiche mainly of the kind of Roger Moore films of the 70s.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, and pastiche could sound intimidating for some, or also bad for some. It's not done in a way that doesn't show love and reverence for spy movies. Matthew Vaughn's done a few spy movies. He knows the genre very well. Yes. I think this is done with a lot of love and care, and he clearly knows his craft.
Definitely.
It's more like a pastiche in the sense that there's a lot of, I'd say, tropes or cliches, perhaps, that are sort of brought into this film. A lot of things that we can expect from modern spy movies are also present in this film, but in the best way, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And as I say, it's a love letter. It's very much, he's clearly loves certain Roger Moore films and other spy films of that era. And this is sort of him fulfilling, I guess, his wish to make a film like that. And it's great fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, just from my side of things, I had a good time watching it with you today at the screening room at NBC Universal. I was surprised by how much it kept my attention.
Yeah,
I wasn't a big fan of some of the marketing leading into it, and there are some twists and turns that we'll get into after the Matthew Vaughn chat in a little bit. But I think overall experiences, I think I had a very good time with it. I laughed. I enjoyed some of the visuals in the film. It's very much a Matthew Vaughn film in how it's presented and stylized. And if that vibes with you, if that's something you love, if you love sort of Kingsman, Kick-Ass, that sort of stuff, this is right in that vein. And you can inject that into my veins because I quite love those films too. You know, if I'm in the mood for it, it does sort of scratch that itch.
Yeah, and it does it really well. Because there are some films that try to get into that world like in a different way. Films like, should we say, The Grey Man, that I feel were just a bit of an artistic failure. I feel like they kind of didn't have anything new to bring to the table, and it felt like it was doing it by numbers. Whilst this film definitely, as I was saying, feels like this love letter. It's the film they really wanted to make, and is very enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, and one thing I found, like I just sort of said, like my attention was sort of kept to the screen the whole time. I wasn't worrying about what time it was or how long we'd been in the theater. And you talk about something like The Grey Man, other sort of streaming films have become this sort of homogenized, well, grey, if I borrowed the title, grey blob at times of just like, these are the tick boxes of a spy film. I feel like Matthew has taken that and added some bits to it. There's things in here I hadn't seen in a spy movie before, which I appreciate. So I suppose then you did sort of cue it up before, but I'll throw the question to you again. For listeners, if you're wondering, Chris, your recommendation, should people go and check this film out?
Definitely. It's a great movie for a date. It's a great movie to hang out with your friends. I think it's a wonderful film to go and see. Definitely at the weekend. I would highly recommend it.
And from my side of things, I would strongly recommend it too. I think see it on the big screen. It is going to get one of those sort of streaming releases quite soon afterwards, because I believe Apple TV is involved with the making of this film. So I wouldn't be surprised that after 6 or 12 weeks, you're seeing it on Apple TV, which is fine. And that certainly would get it to a wider audience. But I would say there's a lot of visuals in this film. It's a very visual film. Go and see it on the big screen. It's got a lot of stars. There's clearly a lot of love put into this. And I'm just a big fan of going to the cinema in the first place.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, definitely see it on the big screen. Some really great visuals. And I think some of the humor too probably works better on the big screen.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't want to see John Cena's face in HD? Indeed. But
that lovely cat.
that lovely cat. That lovely cat. No spoilers there, of course. That's all in the trailer, folks. But I think then, without further ado, I'm sure you're all waiting to hear it. Let's throw to my chat with Mr. Matthew Vaughn. Matthew Vaughn, thank you for joining us here on Spy Hard's podcast. Looking forward to talking about Argylle with you today.
Right.
Lots to talk about. And I think, we talk about spy movies here on the show every week. And,
every week.
Every week. We never take
spy movies for you to do that about?
We've got about 1,000 or so on our list. There's
oh my gosh.
Long history of spy movies.
All right, I will try and cope.
Well, that's actually sort of leads into my first question, because we like royalty here in England, of course, and for modern day, you're one of the kings of spy movies, I would say, linking into the Kingsman there a little bit.
Yes.
But what is it about spy movies that sort of keeps bringing you back?
I imagine you two must love spy movies as well, I hope.
Uh-huh.
Otherwise, I just always loved the world of espionage, full stop. I mean, not just in movies, in books, in documentaries, in aspirations and of spies. And it's probably because I saw a lot of James Bond movies as a kid.
Sure.
Which is and it was just a world where, probably because of the Cold War, spies were more prominent, and I think when I was a kid, spies were the superheroes.
Sure.
And they weren't making great superhero movies back then. So I think deep down we could all be a spy. We can't all be Superman or the Incredible Hulk or whatever it is people want to be, but anyone in the world could be a spy.
It's true. We all could be spies right now. You never know. But
if you're a good one, you wouldn't know.
Well,
yeah.
Or maybe you do it like James Bond and tell everyone you're a spy. And,
that's one of my big. Roger Moore said it. Like what sort of spy walks in the room and everyone says, "Oh, hello, Mr. Bond. Would you like your martini shaken, not stirred?" And you're going, "You're not a good spy." Which is the whole theme of the movie, by the way. That's
sure.
The movie is about a super spy, as we all know and love, and what a real spy should be on the other side.
Well, that actually leads me beautifully onto Argylle. We're talking about spy movies here. What is it about Argylle that sort of interested you and wanted to tell that story?
Sort of taking some of the cliches that I love and being part of creating the tropes and turning it on its head, and having the experience of seeing scenarios done in both styles, saying here's the fantasy version and here's the reality version, and going on that journey, just the juxtaposition of the two worlds of spies that I think we know. There's sort of the Ian Fleming, Kingsman-y, Bond-y, Austin Powers side, and then there's the Le Carre and it's like Smiley's, but there's the realistic spies,
Mhm.
and this was trying to be a blend of both, but still in a fun way.
Because you do sort of walk the line between the two. There is that
Mm.
reality and then that sort of hyper reality of the books in the film. And one thing that stood out to me was sort of watching the action sequences, because you mentioned Bond and then you
Yes.
mentioned something like Smiley's People, for instance. Very different projects. Couldn't be more different, really.
Yeah.
But one
Both
thing
written by spies.
both written by this man knows his spies. I like to
Yes,
hear it.
Yeah.
But how did you find balancing the sort of action between the two? Because there's a sort of hyper reality, as I say, and then trying to keep it more grounded when they're in the sort of real world, as it were.
Yeah. Well, it's difficult because we had to shoot the action sequence twice so that you can intercut between the two.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about sort of dialing up the two different moments. And that was the fun of it. You see, Henry Cavill looking suave, worrying about his hair, getting kissed and then you got Sam Rockwell, who is struggling, but still gets through it, but is a lot harder in the real world, and it's a lot easier in the fantasy world.
Yeah.
So it was just, and it was, it was fun, and it was meant to be great for the author imagining what it should be, and then seeing the reality of what it is, and going, oh wow, fantasy world's a bit nicer to be in than the real world.
It makes you wonder what Ian Fleming would have made of something like The Spy Who Loved Me when it came out compared to what he wrote.
It's funny you said The Spy Who Loved Me was the first Bond movie I saw.
Wow,
right?
okay.
So, which just probably explains why my movies, the tone of a lot of my films, and I loved The Spy Who Loved Me.
Great,
I mean,
great
I
film.
was just like, oh my God, I need to see that again. I saw it in the cinema, and I was like, wow. It was just, wow. So for me, Roger Moore was my first Bond.
Right.
And then I saw Connery, I was like, who's this guy? And I thought he was good, but I preferred Roger Moore, but because, he was my first Bond. Now I think that, I love Connery as well. Once once you mature, should we say? So what would Ian Fleming think? I don't know. I mean, listen, Ian Fleming didn't like Sean Connery.
No.
So, and by the way, that was the basis of Kingsman, was me reading about how was it Terrence Young was literally said to Ian Fleming, I can turn Sean Connery into a gentleman, and took him down to the Savile Row, got him a suit, taught him how to eat, taught him all that stuff, and that always stayed in my head. I thought that was fascinating, and that's what Kingsman sort of was a sort of inspired by the truth of Ian Fleming. But when you come to I don't know. I never met Ian, so I don't know exactly what he's the only person to answer that question, but I think he would be unbelievably proud of the fact that these books he's written have become such a cultural icon and beloved by the world still. It's pretty incredible.
Well, speaking of inspirations and Argylle, were there any films you were looking to sort of pull from for inspiration? Okay.
3. So during lockdown, I watched with the kids, my daughters specifically, we watched Charade, or Charade. I'm getting confused because I'm doing American and English. North by Northwest, and Romancing the Stone.
Right, okay.
And those 3 movies, there's a lot of guidance on how to make this film.
It's interesting with, you've got 2 Cary Grants there, and then a lot of people would say Henry Cavill is sort of channeling that Cary Grant energy nowadays.
Yes.
He's definitely got that sort of leading man look
Yeah,
about
the
him.
sort of a classic leading man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I suppose then, moving on with Argylle a little bit, one of the big things in the film is cats and dogs. There's a lot of cat love in this, but I need
Yes.
to know from you, are you a cat man or a dog man?
I am a dog man with a capital D. And then I ended up having to use my daughter's cat in the film. And by the end of the movie, I'm a dog man with a triple capital D, and I'm a cat man now with a tiny little C.
So you've been won over a little bit.
Chip won me over,
Okay.
but I don't have any desire to get another cat in my life.
I mean, as a dog fan myself, I completely understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And then just talking about cast a little bit with Argylle, we mentioned Henry Cavill, but there's a lot of big names in this. People you worked from before, Samuel L. Jackson, but you've also got, Bryce Dallas Howard. I think is fantastic in the film.
Yeah.
Sam Rockwell as well. And a lot of them have sort of spy histories in their own rights with their filmographies.
Yeah.
What was it like bringing that cast together, and was there any sort of standout performances you'd like to call out?
I think they're all brilliant. I mean, my job as a director is made a lot easier if you have fantastic actors. So, I tweak. I don't have to evoke a performance out of someone. I just have to capture what they're doing. And I think they all balanced off each other. And I'm sort of proud that when we made this movie, everyone in Hollywood wanted us to cast Brad Pitt and Charlize Theron in the roles. And I was like, yeah, but guys, they they could be in the fantasy side.
Yeah.
Probably better in the fantasy than the reality. So we got to, we have to do something very opposite to Henry Cavill and Dua Lipa. But Welcome to Hollywood, they were like, yeah, it wouldn't be better if it was Henry Cavill, Dua Lipa, Brad Pitt, and Charlize Theron. And I was like, be better on the poster, but not better in the movie.
It was seeing Sam Rockwell with a full head of hair and a big beard. It made me feel quite seen as a man who doesn't dress all that well like the spies do. So I was very happy to see that in the film.
Well, Sam is, I just loved the idea of because the thing about spies, and I love Frederick Forsyth as well, his novels, and I was really intrigued that I would love to read this book, but it will never be published. Is he wrote a book that was read by, now we know he was a spy, but we didn't back then, but it's pretty obvious. It was read by MI5, and they begged him not to publish it.
Okay.
Because they said, if you publish this and someone decides to do it, they will bring England to its knees, and there is nothing we can do about it. I was like, what the hell was in this book?
Yeah.
And he didn't publish it. So, but that was fascinating for me.
What happened with Jean le Carré a little bit as well? He had his sort of biography written, but they wouldn't allow him to put it out until he was until he passed away because of all the secrets inside of that too.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see what these spies hold on this and sort of the power they have.
Do you guys not know this? Why did le Carré write under a different name? Do you know?
I think it's more just to disassociate himself from his real life spy work, but that came back to get him very quickly in his career. People knew he was worked for MI5 very quickly when he was writing. They figured that out pretty early on.
Wow.
So no, I don't know why he chose to go that way. Maybe just to sort of have a pseudonym he could act under.
Wow.
Maybe he just liked being undercover.
Continuing.
Well, quite
don't
so.
Yeah. Don't judge a spy by its cover.
Oh,
There you go.
and we have the book. There we go. Well, a couple of questions as we're getting sort of the call for the time here. Firstly, there is a big twist in this film, which we won't talk about here, but we'll just talk about keeping things undercover, under lid on things.
Keeping a secret.
Yeah. How did you manage to do that? Because it hasn't leaked out some of the big twists in this film, and it's a big twist.
Do you know what I've found in life? Everybody loves a secret. And I think people get and if you say to someone, keep a secret, you should keep a secret. And that's why we had the keeper of the secrets in the film. When I read that about the Quran, that it's actually a sin to break a secret. I thought, wow, that's a good one. And so I really wanted to. So we've told people, don't let the cat out of the bag, literally, so that it becomes fun and you can watch the movie, and then after you watched it, you can discuss it all. So far so good, but hey, it hasn't got into the cinemas yet, so let's see what happens the day after release. But so far everybody has behaved impeccably.
It's just, you think in this day of sort of social media that these things would get out, but I'm very happy at this point in time that there hasn't been that sort of discussion, and people will go in and be surprised, which is what you want.
Definitely, and it's hard to do, and we had to, Universal, to their credit, which I'm very proud of them doing, they didn't do a trailer that gave everything away, because normally they do, and I was like, please don't, and they respected it. So thank you to that.
Well, the final question I have for you, Matthew, and this is more about spy movies in general. Every single person we've ever had on the show over the years, we've asked this question.
Oh boy.
John Glenn, Lee Tamahori, directors, a ton of them. So a lot of pressure here. What is your favorite spy movie of all time?
I think I actually say The Spy Who Loved Me.
Wow.
Yeah, because that's what I fell in love with spies, and every time it's on, I can watch it again and again. So I'm going to have to say The Spy Who Loved Me.
I mean, it actually just tracks a lot with Argylle and with Kingsman, like you said as well. You can see the sort of you watching that and watching it many times, I imagine, The Spy Who Loved Me, and sort of turning that into a film. It's a wonderful film and a wonderful choice.
Well, there you go.
Does that make Roger Moore your Bond as well?
Well, he was my Bond because of my childhood, but I love all the Bonds. Like, I think Lazenby was amazing. I
think so too.
Yeah, Her Majesty's Secret Service was a great film.
Why didn't we get a follow-up? We wanted that revenge film.
I know why he didn't, because he was he'll tell you, but it was all about money, and he overstepped the mark too early, and thought it was going to ruin his career being Bond.
Wasn't hip, I believe.
Yeah,
it was.
It wasn't cool enough.
And look at us now. Quite so well.
But at least we still respect his performance as Bond.
We do, and I think On Her Majesty's is one of the strongest Bond films of all time.
Yeah, it was beautifully made, great story, great music, great locations, great Blofeld.
Yeah.
I never thought Savalas would be. Yeah, was it
You wouldn't
Blofeld? It was
think.
Blofeld. No,
It was Blofeld.
it was Blofeld.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just make sure I hadn't got that wrong.
He has a different name in the film, but he is basically.
Yeah, he has a
Blofeld.
different name.
Yeah.
He's Count von
Count.
Schlossenberg, blah blah blah. Something.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Spot on. Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you, Matthew, about this. Argylle is a triumph, and I think it's looking at what you did in Kingsman. It's grown from there. You've got a great cast, and you've got a great film.
Well, I also say one thing, as you guys are spy experts.
Sure.
That bloody quote on the front of this book. I said that as a joke, sarcastically, when we were working on it, and I hadn't seen the book cover. I went, it's not greater than Ian Fleming, all right? Because I was like, wankers for writing that. I was furious. I was like, so that was a joke to someone that got printed. So welcome to the world that we live in, that you can't say anything in jest anymore.
Well, just for reference, the quote says the most incredible spy franchise since Ian Fleming. So
Yeah.
you're walking back on that one, which is
that was being sarcastic, and
Yeah.
someone in America thought I was being real. So,
well. I'm glad as well you throw out some names like Jean le Carré in the film as well. There's a little bit more love than just Ian Fleming, because there are lots of spy authors out there that deserve love.
100%. Le Carré is, I mean, Ludlum. I can go on and on. I read them all. I love them all. I mean, it's their yeah. Well, and I tell you, the greatest spy book for me
Go on.
is Iron Pilgrim.
Wow. Okay, that's an outside choice. I like that.
Iron Pilgrim, I think, is a masterpiece.
Well, Matthew Vaughn, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today, and I hope everyone checks out Argylle.
I not as much as I do. So, but thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Well, there you go, folks. That was my chat with Mr. Matthew Vaughn. I didn't believe I'd ever be interviewing the guy who made The Kingsman, the guy who made even Argylle as well. It was a lovely chat, and I want to thank Matthew for taking the time to speak with myself, and I want to thank the folks at NBC Universal for looking after myself and Chris, letting us come to the screening and come to the interview. They were nothing but stars, so thank you to both of them.
Yeah, and thank you from me as well. That was really great.
But this is your warning, folks. Spoiler alert, red alert, ring the sirens. From this point onwards, Chris and I are going to be talking about some of the major twists and turns in Argylle. If you don't want the film spoiled for you, and I'm going to stress this, there are some big twists that they're trying to keep embargoed on the film, and they don't want getting out there. Kind of like the Mousetrap, the play in central London. They kind of want to keep that twist to people who have seen the film. So if you really don't want it spoiled, this is the time to just tune out, and we'll see you next week. And thank you for listening. But for those who want to hear more about Argylle, that was your last chance. Are you ready, Chris? Should we talk spoilers?
I'm ready.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's just tackle this big twist in the film, because here's the premise. I said the synopsis at the top of the film. It's about this writer. The big twist in the film is that this writer is actually, technically speaking, Agent Argylle. But the twist is it's kind of like a Manchurian candidate. She's been brainwashed. She's forgotten her identity. It's Agent, is it Rachel Kyle? I believe I read it down.
That's it. Or R. Kyle.
Yeah, R. Kyle. Interesting. I didn't see it coming. I can say that. No. I didn't see it coming, and I appreciate as I said, I sort of led it before that I hadn't seen this before in a spy film, that sort of twist. And you spend the first 60 minutes assuming she's this unassuming writer until all of this is dumped on you by Samuel L. Jackson and Sam Rockwell, who are both great in the film, which we'll get to those people in a second. But this big twist, and slowly she begins to remember this life she's spent as a secret agent with all of these black ops she's been doing. And it adds another twist to the element that she is actually working for the bad guys most of the time until she loses her memory and is brainwashed by them. So that's the big twist, The lead of the film, played by none other than Bryce Dallas Howard, is actually Argylle.
Yeah.
I can't say I saw that coming, but what did you think of the twist, Chris?
Yeah, so immediately I was just thinking of Jason Bourne a little bit.
Right.
It's sort of like become the Bourne identity in some ways. And obviously memory and espionage are both very interesting themes. And so, yeah, I didn't see that twist coming. There were one or two other bits that I sort of saw coming, but that one I wasn't expecting. So I thought, but I did groan at the Kyle. I did find that a little bit groan worthy, but other than that, I could accept the twist.
I was raising a Roger Moore style eyebrow when I heard it. I think you even heard a slight giggle from me when they said the reveal. I was like, okay, this is what we're doing. But it's, like I said, it's something I hadn't really seen before in this sense. But like, it's interesting you mentioned Born Identity. I hadn't made that connection, but you're right. This whole forgetting of your memory and reassembling your life and taking the agency back on your past decisions, because Jason Bourne was this black ops operator doing terrible things under the Treadstone umbrella. And I keep forgetting her name, Rachel Kyle. It's Ellie Conway in my head. It's Bryce Dallas Howard. That's who it is. Was doing all these.
So you got 3 names to remember.
Yeah. Welcome to the spoiler section, folks. Bryce Dallas Howard is this person who has this dark history, but she chooses through living this life for 5 years of this assumed identity as Ellie Conway, this spy novelist, to do good in the world. And by the end of the film, she has fully gone good, as it were, and is in a big, lovely walk off into the sunset with Sam Rockwell. So I'll be interested to hear what you guys think of the twist when you see the film. But I think, from my side of things, I didn't see it coming. And despite the initial knee-jerk reaction of giggling at the name, which is a bit much, and
it's on a big screen, isn't it? I think, if I remember correctly, it's like she's looking at it on a big screen. It's like, oh, Kyle, and you're like, oh, man.
Like, okay, that feels like a what if in a writer's room, and someone goes, hey, what if it's our Kyle, and everyone's like, yes, that's it. No one went yes and then added to it, but you can put that to one side because it's an interesting twist, and it actually just sends the film in a completely different direction, because she does become this kind of Jason Bourne as her powers are reactivating, and she begins to remember she has martial arts training and gun training and stuff, and it all slowly kicks in, very much like the Bourne Identity. I mean, speaking of influences on the film, that's something I want to sort of breeze on past before we get to likes and dislikes. Is immediately when the showing stopped, I wrote down Romancing the Stone meets Fight Club meets The Manchurian Candidate. I didn't know I needed to add meets The Bourne Identity onto that.
Yeah, and The Spy Who Loved Me. I think a lot of the art direction takes a hand from The Spy Who Loved Me.
Yes, there is a lot of that sort of tongue-in-cheek when it comes to this film, a lot of that. But it's in terms of influences, I don't think you can go wrong with any of those films.
No, definitely not.
There's probably other films that I could say it's copying from that are worse, but I'm going to go with the best ones, like Manchurian and Romancing the Stone. So, but let's get to things that we like. Let's celebrate Argylle a little bit. Chris, why don't you start us off?
Well, I actually really like the Ellie Conway character, and I think in some ways obviously her being revealed as Argylle, if there are planned sequels, I would have been happier if she doesn't become this sort of superhero agent, but becomes a kind of hybrid of the two characters, because I quite like Ellie Conway as this sort of unexpected kind of suddenly becoming a hero, because she's a bookish writer who has confidence issues or anxiety issues, I think she describes it as. And it was quite nice to see a character like that going through this world. So if there is a sequel and she's just like this expert and not finding her way, it might sort of fall into an area that's not as interesting as this film has been. I
think that's a very good point, and I think the character of Rachel Kyle is interesting, and the sort of duality that's going to exist inside that character does have a lot of room, a lot of legs for sequels. And I think it sort of speaks to one of the likes I have as well, is this: the film turns into it being led by Bryce Dallas Howard as this sort of supercharged spy, this James Bond-esque person. And Lord knows, do we need more female-led spy franchises? Because we've had a few attempts, the Red Sparrows, the Atomic Blondes. We love them as spy movie fans, but they haven't done well with audiences. So I sincerely hope that Argylle does well, and we get to see another one. Because I agree with you, Chris, because I think going forward, there is definitely like ideas on the table. There's things they could do with this person who wants to live this bookish life but has all these skills, and how do they exist in the world? You think of something like The Long Kiss Goodnight, which has a lot of connections to this film as well, like forgetting that you were a secret agent and remembering that you were a secret agent. And she tries to blend the two throughout the film, and by the end she has a reckoning and sort of brings those two characters together. At the end of Argylle, you see her finalizing her 5th book, which sort of ends the story, because one thing this film talks about is, she obviously lost the memory of being a spy, and the way that her subconscious has been dealing with these is by writing spy novels, but basically translating her subconscious memories into spy novels and sort of predicting true events, and that's how she gets involved in all of these spy jinx, as it were. So by doing the 5th book, she kind of closes off the arc of that character. But that isn't to say that there aren't other, there's specters of the world and things like that. They could cause more chaos, and they need the world's best secret agents. So you're going to call out for Rachel Kyle, and you're going to call out for Sam Rockwell's Aiden. They're going to be the people you call, and Samuel Jackson's obviously a goodie in this one too. I'm not sure you'll necessarily see Henry Cavill appear in a future film, or Dua Lipa, for instance, or John Cena, because they're fictional characters in this film. But the real ones, I would like to see come back, and I'd like to see what they did with them.
Indeed. Do you know another film that pops into my mind? I'll just say it now before I forget it. Is the film Spy. And it kind of has for me, it has some similarities. That fish out of water getting into espionage. Obviously with Spy, she was an analyst and support character. Whilst obviously with our character, she's just a spy novelist. But there was some moments, the humor, there's a lot of humor in this film. Well, it's a very funny film, and it just kind of is a little bit on par with Spy with the humor, I felt.
Yeah, it's definitely got that its tongue firmly in its cheek, where I think that's where Spy lives too. And I think it's quite successful. There were a lot of people in the audience laughing. Not all the jokes landed for me, but hey ho, these things are just sort of you take a swig and you see what hits, what sticks, I should say. But in terms of something I wanted to highlight as a like, I think just the performances of Bryce Dallas Howard and Sam Rockwell are very strong. It could be a very silly film, and you could look down on it a little bit. And I've seen Sam Rockwell do amazing things in the past, and I always go back to his performance in Charlie's Angels for some reason. I don't know why, but that's what I think of when I think of Sam Rockwell, and he's channeling that craziness in this film is coming through, especially in the early parts where she still thinks she's a spy novelist. And I loved seeing it. And the film takes that pivot that we said, and Bryce Dallas Howard becomes kind of your central secret agent halfway through. And you could go, oh no, it's this could be bad. It's Bryce Dallas Howard. Who knows what she's capable of in this sense? But she's led films before. She has that star appeal, and she carries the film. You buy that she has this internal conflict throughout. Once that reveal is made, and I don't think she. Basically, to suffice to say, I think they both were very strong, and I would love to see more.
Yeah. Sam Rockwell was fantastic. Bryce Dallas Howard, fantastic. To be honest, I've not watched many films of her because I've not seen the Jurassic Park films. I think I know more of her as a director for doing The Mandalorian and things like that. But and obviously she's the daughter of Ron Howard, isn't she? But she's fantastic in this film. I think she really has nailed this sort of role.
Yeah, I think she's great. She also pops up in a few other things. She's in Black Mirror. She's done, as you say, she's directed a bit as well. She popped up in Rocket Man. Yeah, she's doing her bit, and now she's doing her bit for spy movies, which is great to see. Do you have any other likes you wanted to bring up? I've got one more.
Well, I think again, just is the humor. I think it was really it was a really good lot of setup and payoff of this script. There weren't really anything other than obviously the twist, but there was nothing in it that jumped out as sort of unexpected. It felt sort of appropriately set up to then pay off later. I think there's only one little reveal that at the very finale that to me was a little. It was set up, but it kind of did feel a bit unexpected.
Which was that? Was that the Henry Cavill right at the very end?
Oh no! Actually, it was the lady coming back and whacking Catherine O'Hara over the head. It was like, where did that person come from? And then obviously you find out who she is. It's like, oh, okay, so she's the one who was the fan. They sort of did set it up, but that was the only bit that felt totally random at the initial watching.
That bit did bump on me, and I want to talk about the sort of finale sequence in a little bit, maybe when we mosey on over to a different section. So I'll put a pin in that and come back to it. I just wanted to say the last thing I have for likes is I think it had quite a strong pace. It's a 2 hour and 10 minute film. That seems to be the sweet spot for me at the moment, about 2 hours. And there wasn't a moment, like I said, where I was checking my watch or sort of uninvested in proceedings. It keeps on going. It's propulsive, and the twists keep you interested in and asking questions. And they're not twists that necessarily come out of nowhere, except for maybe that big one that we spoke about. But the seeds are planted. It's kind of like a No Way Out situation, the Kevin Costner film, where there are seeds planted. And I imagine this film would probably do quite well on a revisit, because you'd probably start looking for things that lead you to think about her being the super spy and things that she did. I'm sure they are there. But like I say, it was a well-paced film that kept me interested, and I loved the performances. So I can't fault it.
No, exactly. I think we were talking about this earlier. I think if I was to put it in star categories, for me, it's a solid 3-star movie. It's incredibly well executed for what it is. In terms of Matthew Vaughn's sort of filmography, for me, it doesn't quite get. It's not quite as good as Kingsman or Kick-Ass, but it's still incredibly solid for what it is.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I would want to go out and sort of on a limb and say where I would put it right now. I don't think I've really digested it as much. I mean, you think of like X-Men First Class is probably the one I hold up as my favorite of his films, and that's also a spy film in its own right too.
Yeah.
The man knows these spy films.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Red alert, spy hards! We are shaking things up over on the Patreon page.
That's right, we are launching an exclusive new show where we tackle the exploits of the small screen's greatest secret agents, like Jack Bauer, George Smiley, and beyond.
And don't forget, every month you also get 2 Agents in the Field episodes where we decode the adventures of your favorite spy actors in their biggest non-spy movies. But Cam, tell the people what we have coming up next.
Now's the time to catch up with our January offerings, reviews of Batman Begins and the Ian Fleming biopic GoldenEye, plus the debrief where we looked at The Beekeeper, Slow Horses, and the Oscar nominations.
So don't get left out in the cold. Help support your favorite spy movie podcast and join the circus at patreon.com/spyhards. But before this message self-destructs, let's get back to the spy jinx. But I want to mosey on over to dislikes, because I had a couple of things I wanted to mention. But do you have anything you'd like to bring up?
I think we might be on the same page. For me, so the action sequences, there was just some very poor visual graphics, and in the fantasy scenes that works, but when it comes to crossing over into then Ellie Conway's lived experience, it doesn't work as well anymore, and it's not and it doesn't feel as grounded, which then for me ever so slightly, usually on another film I would de-invest even more. I think Bryce Dallas Howard could have kept me, her performance kept me captivated, so I always felt there were stakes for her. But there are 1 or 2 moments where I just felt like the special effects really kind of let everything down.
And yeah, just to sort of paint you all a picture who haven't seen it yet, but you'll sort of just want to hear the spoilers. There are moments in this film that happen within the books that she has written, Ellie Conway has written, and you're seeing her in the writing process of making the films, and you're seeing Agent Argylle, played by Henry Cavill. You're seeing John Cena, who plays his kind of analyst character, and you're seeing the villains played by like Dua Lipa, people like that. And what happens in this world. And there's a moment where Dua Lipa who's a musician, if you don't know, folks. I only recently learned that myself because I'm apparently very old. According to someone I asked about who Dua Lipa was. She's driving away on a motorcycle, and Henry Cavill is chasing after her on the rooftops in a car, riding between buildings. Happens right at the start of the film. A lot of it's in the trailer, and it looks insane. It couldn't happen in reality, but because you've quickly learned that this is in a fictionalized world, within a fictionalized world of a film, you can go, okay, it's like watching a video game. That's absolutely fine. And there are moments where like the action's quite grounded in this film. There's a couple of like hand-to-hand combat sequences, some grounded stuff with Sam Rockwell on the train, for instance. The extraction on the train, I think, was very well done.
Yeah,
it reminded me a lot of Bullet Train, a recent film. In terms of sort of close combat on a train, or maybe Spectre as well. But by the end, which will probably sort of move us over onto my main dislike, is there's this final sequence of showdowns that take place in the villain's lair. The villain is played by Bryan Cranston of Breaking Bad and Malcolm in the Middle of fame. He's done other things, but that's what I think of. And it just goes very loud and very outrageous, I think, just for the sake of marketing material, or because they wanted to paint a beautiful picture with colored flares. But it turns what could be, I mean, you could say, if I'm playing like against what I think, it could have just been a very boring shootout that we've seen 1,000 times, and at least Matthew Vaughn has pumped something different into the proceedings, and it looks different. It becomes more like a dance number as they're shooting people. And some people will hate that, and some people will love that they're doing something different. I'm not sure I'm on the love side. I don't necessarily hate it. I think hate is a very strong word. But like you said before, Chris, these moments can push you out of the film and cause you to detach a little bit. And that's what I found I was doing during that sequence.
Yeah, I was with you on that. It's sort of like, it was very music video-ish. It didn't really feel like it was really making a point, other than it just is a bit different. And it's sort of fun to watch, and it's very well choreographed, the music and stuff. And yeah, so it just felt like a music video, that sequence.
Wasn't it also like a Leona Lewis song playing, which I thought was really strange?
Ooh, that's above my station, unfortunately. I'd have to look at the soundtrack album list to be able to get to that point. But it was sort of, it felt, the soundtrack overall felt a bit 80s. I could be wrong, but it did to me feel very 80s.
It's quite an eclectic mix, but there is a dislike I want to get to about soundtrack, so I'll come back to that in a minute. I have a note that's very nerdy, but that's what I do best. But like from your, I mean, for those who don't know Chris, who haven't heard Spy Game episode, which is the best one he's been on, I would say it's a great episode. Go and check that out, folks. But you know, apart from co-hosting the Secrets and Spies podcast, you're also a filmmaker in your own right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've even done a spy movie short film yourself, which I recommend people go and check out.
Thank you.
But what I want to ask you, just from a filmmaking perspective, and we're talking about this scene at the end of the film, what do you think was going through Matthew Vaughn's head when he put that together? What was he trying for? And I don't mean to put you on the spot. If you don't have an answer, that's fine. But just to sort of, just your thoughts.
With the coloured smoke sequence.
Yeah, and also just like well, that's the main thing. And also the ice skating sequence that comes immediately afterwards. It feels very computer generated, and it just felt a bit, it felt like a facsimile of a fight sequence.
Yeah, it did. Those two sequences are very video gamey as well. What's going through his head? I think it is just this, sometimes the director, you kind of are just trying to find a new angle on things. Like, there are ways, I mean, I don't think it was trying to do this, but you could make a statement about violence in this moment, but not in a terrible way. And you could kind of slow it down and really show the impact of violence. So like on that George Clooney film set during the Iraq War, I've forgotten his name now, but they have this sequence where there's like a slow, they slow down, the bullet hits, and you kind of see what it does, and they describe that you don't walk away from a bullet wound like you do in the movies. He could have done that. Obviously, that would tonally be a bit different. Yeah, so I think it was just sort of trying to just be different, but keep it tonally in that kind of realm of comedy. If anything, I was thinking of latter part of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the movie,
right?
When they're kind of together battling people, it gets a bit choreographed, and and it just gets a bit. There's even a bit where it gets a bit cheesy, where they have a heart comes out of the smoke. And I think they just went a bit too far with it. I think it was quite a cool concept. Like, the smoke tactically makes it difficult for the enemy to see them. There's something kind of cool in that. But but then it just sort of turned it into this sort of music video, and it goes on too long. It could have gone on for just like 30 seconds to a minute. I think it's almost 2 minutes.
Well, it's the whole length of the song. And if I'm going to quickly just Google the Leona Lewis song, I think it is. I'll tell you the exact length of the sequence.
Three Kings is the George Clooney film I was thinking of, by the way. And actually, fun enough, a relative of my wife's in that movie. But anyway, so, there are different things. So sometimes you are presented a very familiar kind of scene, a shootout. And as a director, you're partly thinking, how can I make this different? But also you want it to tell the story. So a good director, in a way, is always trying to make it organically fit the story when whatever this sort of layer of difference they put on, and it could be to do with the way the camera works, like with, if you think about the shootout on the D-Day beach at the beginning of Saving Private Ryan, you know, that's a choice that's very interesting. It's very sort of point of viewy in places where you get to really feel D-Day at the beginning of that movie. So that's a choice, because that could have just been a very much a distant camera just filming people shooting at each other, but Steven Spielberg make a very distinctive choice there. So I think Matthew Vaughn was just trying to find this way to make that scene a little bit more entertaining but comic, because also with violence on screen, obviously we talk a lot about death by firearm these days, and a lot of people have mixed feelings about seeing guns on screen, and so in a way it kind of slightly sanitizes it slightly, because there you can't see the effect of the gun, and it sort of just takes it away from suddenly being a serious movie. So I think there are lots of things at play there, and you know, so ultimately I think that's sort of where I would say he's probably coming from. I could be completely wrong. When you speak to him, you'll find out.
Well, that could be the case. And, you know, I was just I was thinking about what I said earlier, and it may be just being a way of just presenting a fight sequence that's different, because we've seen so many of these corridor shootouts in so many films, not even spy films, but just action films in the last 40 years. And we've seen it enough times. Maybe he just wanted to do something a bit different. And if you were wondering, I was right. It is Run by Leona Lewis, and the song lasts 4 minutes and 50 seconds.
Wow. So yeah, it is a very long sequence. The other thing as well, during that sequence, Bryan Cranston was like shouting out orders, do this, do that, and to me some of those orders felt like, well, why the hell didn't you do that in the first place?
Oh, well, I put in the heat vision on.
Well, yeah, put the heat seeking thing on, then use the smoke dispersal fan or whatever. It's just like all his decision making felt just like a few minutes too late, and I was just like, you're not a very good bad guy. You're not a very practical bad guy.
I mean, but these are like small critiques we're making here.
Exactly,
I mean, I think the big thing we're talking about was sort of the exaggerated action got a bit much at times, which I think it is really like it's a preference thing. It's what you're into. This might be exactly what you like in an action scene, because you don't care too much about reality or how many bullets are in the clip. I don't really care. So it all plays into that. But when we're talking about nitpicking and music, here is my final dislike.
There we go.
Now, throughout this film, we are treated to Now and Then by the Beatles. The new song from the Beatles came out just before Christmas. It went to number 1. For those who don't know anything about Now and Then, or are wondering how the Beatles brought out a new song in 2023, it's because it's an old John Lennon tape that they were given by Yoko Ono, and in the 90s they tried to turn into a song. But because of the quality, or the poor quality, I should say, of the tape recording that John gave Yoko, passed away, and it went to Paul, George, and Ringo, they decided not to finish it. They did 2 other songs, Free as a Bird and Real Love. Now and Then got sort of left to one side, but because of the new technology from the new Get Back film that came out recently on Apple TV, they were able to strip out some of the artifacts of that tape and present it in a cleaner fashion. So unfortunately George has passed away since, but Ringo and Paul went back, finished off the recording, and put out the last Beatles song. That's your setup. In this film, it's played about 4 times. It's quite heavy-handed. Now, we know Apple has the rights to this song, so they're really trying to push this song on audiences, which I don't have a problem with. It's like having a soundtrack to a film. What I do have a problem with is the fact that Sam Rockwell's character Aidan tells Bryce Dallas Howard's character of Ellie or Rachel or whoever that's their song, and they learnt it years ago and they've known it for a long time. Now, it's only been out for about 2 months, so there's no way this is happening. Now, if they played the John Lennon demo tape, I would have been happy with it. But they didn't. They played the Now and Then that came out a month ago. Such a nitpick, but boy, did it wind me up.
If only they added a line, she could have said, it sounds so much better than when we last played it. And then it would have fixed your problem.
Or they said it was the year 2030.
Yeah.
then
It's a bit. It isn't really clear. I don't think it's very clear what it's set, is it? Or is it? I don't know. I don't remember a date.
I
on the
don't
screen.
think it's necessary. I mean, maybe if you like zoom in on the digital screens, you'll see that sort of thing. It could be in 2030. I mean, this is all a send up of a film, isn't it? Like, it's tongue in cheek. I shouldn't take it too seriously. But as a Beatles fan, that bit jumped out to me, and I felt like I had to speak it up and tell you all about this very silly, annoying thing that I noticed.
Oh, Scott, it's brilliant. I didn't even clock it at all. So it's really great to hear, because I think this is the thing about filmmaking is there's so many different expertise in the audience, and I've always admired filmmakers who kind of can anticipate the various different expertise and get those things right, because there's nothing more annoying than, I don't know, your area comes up on the screen and they make a real hash up of it. So that, in a way, it's sort of it's nice to hear that there's something I missed completely that definitely is a big thing.
Well, like I think it's probably just a note from Apple. They wanted the song included on the soundtrack to get a few more plays on Spotify, and I mean that's absolutely fine. That's just synergy marketing. That's just the way that these things happen now. You have different hands in the pot or the honey or whatever the metaphor is I'm trying to find. It is just the way that it is. But, overall, I stick to what I said at the start of the show. I recommend this film. I think you should go and check it out. It isn't perfect. I think I would say it's more like 3.5. Chris gives it a 3. But I think you'll have a fun time. I don't think your 2 hours will be wasted. And that is the important thing.
Yeah. No, exactly. I think if you watch that at the weekend, you'll come out and you'll, unless you really hate that style of humor. So here's the other thing. So if you're a real diehard James Bond fan and you're expecting to see a Roger Moore-esque movie, you probably may not enjoy it, because it's a bit like Austin Powers. I think I was saying earlier, this in a way is the Austin Powers of the Roger Moore era, in some ways, and so it sort of is a send up of those kind of movies. So when you watch that action sequence at the beginning, and most of the action sequences are all kind of played for humor, but with a touch of seriousness, so you feel them. But ultimately, it is all played for laughs, and so for some people, if you don't like that, like if you couldn't cope with watching Archer or Austin Powers, then you might not enjoy the film. But if you can take your James Bond seriousness hat off, you will enjoy it. So
I can't say I've ever combined James Bond seriousness hat and the Roger Moore era.
Well, no, exactly. This is probably why Roger Moore these days is, less liked than he was at the time. As a kid, those films, I loved them, but as an adult, I find them less entertaining, and in some places embarrassing now.
just stop talking, because there's people that are just switching off right now and they don't want to hear anything more from you, Chris. So
I'm sorry. I do love A View to a Kill, though, which is a bit of a controversial Roger Moore choice, but there we go.
Well, you're the perfect replacement for Cam, because that's one of his favorites too. So there you go.
Excellent.
But there you go. That was our chat about Argylle. It's out in cinemas worldwide on February the 2nd. We both recommend you go and check it out.
I hope you enjoy it.
Well, Chris, I want to thank you for coming along for the Argylle festivities, for joining me on this mission this week in this Declassified episode for the new spy film Argylle. But before I let you go and before I throw to what's coming up, where can people hear more from you?
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Scott, for having me on and for inviting me to the Argylle screening. So yeah, if people want to find out more about me, if you go to secretsandspiespodcast.com, you can find a podcast there. Also, if you just type in Secrets and Spies to any podcast app, you will find the podcast on there, and you can hear me and Matt chatting about sort of real espionage things, geopolitics, and all sorts of crazy shenanigans that are going on in the world, and us trying to make sense of it.
Absolutely, and you've been on a couple of our episodes in the past as well, but we'll put links in the show notes below to make it even easier for you folks. If you want to hear more from Chris, just look down below. There'll be links to everything there. And now I don't have Cam to throw to like I usually do to talk about what we've got coming up, so it falls to me, poor old Agent Scott, to throw you to next week. Now, we are in the midst of our celebration of Mission Impossible 2. We had the review earlier this week, and coming up next week on the show, we are continuing the festivities of slow-mo motorcycling and dove action for Mission Impossible 2, because we have 2 Spy Master interviews for you, from Matthew Vaughn this week to next week. It's all go here. We are firstly joined by the co-writer of the film, Mr. Brannon Braga. Now, if that name doesn't ring any bells to you, just look him up. I mean, he has had his hands in a lot of things, including Star Trek The Next Generation, Star Trek First Contact. He is the man, and, it was a big thrill for me and Cam to speak to him, as I'm sure you can imagine. Very insightful chat, and you can learn about what Tom Cruise likes to do for lunch. And following that, later on in the week, we are joined by the producer of the infamous soundtrack for Mission Impossible 2, Mr. Mitchell Lieb, and his stories on working with Fred Durst will change your life. I cannot stress this enough. It is absolutely hilarious. It is a Hollywood producer, completely unhinged and ready to tell all of the stories behind the scenes. You'll hear about Tom Cruise, you'll hear about Fred Durst, you'll hear about Metallica. It is all there for you next week. So your mission, folks, should you choose to accept it, is to join us as we continue our mission into Mission Impossible 2 with our interviews of Brandon Braga and Mitchell Lieb. And if you like what you heard on this episode, please consider supporting us over on Patreon, patreon.com/spyhards. Plenty of bonus episodes to get there, and you'll be helping continue the Spy Jinx. And if you don't already, make sure you follow us discreetly on social media at Spyhards, that's SPYHARDS, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But until next time, folks, you'll find me doing the whirly bird.